All right. So, welcome to all attendees around the world. We're happy that you are joining us here today for Professor Saudah Namyalo's lecture on documenting the Baswa cultural and linguistic heritage. This lecture forms part of the ELSEA project, which stands for Enhancing Linguistic Scholarship in Eastern Africa. And I will tell you a bit more about it as a sort of background information to the lecture. So this project has been running since September and is a collaboration between Saudah Namyalo and Alan Asimwe at Makerere University in Uganda, Lotta Aunio at Helsinki University, Finland, Bert Remeijse at Edinburgh University, Scotland, and myself, Janneke van der Wal, at Leiden University in the Netherlands. And we are incredibly grateful to Una Europa for granting the funds to make this project happen, because we think this is very important. So what is very important then, you may ask? Well, in this project, this ELSEA project, we have developed an online course for 40 early career researchers, linguists in and from Eastern Africa, who have just finished their exams, and we will then hold a hands-on summer school in Kampala to make them better equipped to describe the languages of Eastern Africa. And that is very important because many of these languages are under-described and under threat of extinction. So that's what the ELSEA project is about. And this extinction scenario is also the case of the Kuswa language spoken by the Baswa people in Western Uganda. That is what Saudah will tell you all about today. So Professor Saudah Namyalo is a professor of linguistics in the Department of African Languages at Makerere University and the serving dean at the School of Languages, Literature and Communication. She has documented the art of barcloth making among the Baganda, the disappearing legends of the Banyala. She's compiled a bilingual talking English Luruli Lunyala dictionary, a dictionary of Luganda proverbs and idioms, an English Lugandan linguistics dictionary, and published a book on terminological modernization of Luganda in the field of linguistics, among many other things. She is passionate about social linguistics, multilingualism, multiculturalism, and promoting and preserving Uganda's indigenous languages and cultures. And she keeps, as she describes herself, creative hope and pragmatic realism in the changing environment of endangered languages. As recently as this April, she has conducted a documentation study of the Baswa together with Professor Alena Witzlak-Makarevich. Very strong team. They've been at it for many years. And so I'm looking forward to hearing what they have learned. Saudah, over to you. We are happy to have you here.
Thank you very much, Janneke, for the beautiful introduction. Allow me to share my presentation. Okay. Okay, is the screen okay on your side?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much once again. Good afternoon, everyone. Here in Uganda, it is already 2 p.m. I'm happy to be sharing with you some of the preliminary findings we have so far gotten from our research. I will be talking about it towards the end. I'm delighted to be talking to you on the topic I called We Died the Day We Left the Forest, documenting the collective memories of the lost heritage of the Basua of Bundibugyo. And this lecture is under the Europa lecture series. Thank you for the opportunity that you gave me to present to a wider audience. As a way of my talk outline, I will take you through who are the Basua of Bundibugyo, and I would discuss briefly how happy they were before they were evicted from the forest. And then I will briefly take you through the immediate effects which the Baswa suffered after their eviction from the forest. And in details, I will try to discuss the lost cultural heritage of this community And I will conclude by talking about the ongoing language documentation efforts to preserve the Baswa language and a bit of their culture, if there is any still remaining. Who are the Basua of Bundibugyo? When you read through the scant literature which is available, this community is referred to as the Batwa of Bundibugyo. However, the community doesn't want to be referred to as the Batwa. The word Batwa means a short person or the short people. So they don't like the term which many people refer them to. They are called the Baswa. So I'll be talking to the Baswa of Bundibugyo and not the Batwa and not the Pygmies. In some wider literature, they will be referred to as the Pygmies. So the Baswa live in the Bundibugyo district in the western region of Uganda, bordering the Democratic Republic of Congo. This particular group is believed to have migrated from the Ituri forest in Congo. And I think for some who have read a little bit about the Pygmies of Africa, there are quite a number of such kind of people in the Ituri forest. So they tell us that they migrated from there and crossed into Uganda. And over the years, they settled in various locations in and around the Semulik forest. Now, when we tried to probe from them to ask them when did they come, when did they leave Ituri forest to come to Uganda, none of the surviving Baswa elders remember that. The person you see in the picture, we refer to her as Mama Edereda Dingoro, who is the paternal aunt to the King Geoffrey Nzito. Be seeing King Geoffrey Nzito shortly. She tells us that her father and grandfather were both born, raised, and died and buried in Semulik forest. Maybe that gives us an estimate of how many years these people spent in the forest. Could be 150 years plus. So at the moment, we can't trace when they came to Uganda from Ituri forest. So the Baswa traditionally lived as hunters and gatherers, like other group of this nature elsewhere in Africa. And they derive their sustenance from forest resources such as honey, wild fruits, animals, mushrooms, vegetables, everything they needed for food, they got it from the forest. And they also relied on the forest for medicinal plants and materials, which they used to make quite a number of crafts and other materials they needed, for example, during fishing and even hunting itself. So they got everything from the forest. The Baswa, like many other Bantu communities, they were organized into clans. So they had quite a number of clans, and I mentioned some of them, like the Bapwanga, the Bandibukusu, and the Bandikutendiani, and many others. And as the Baswa, they found emotional and spiritual well-being in the forest. I'll be talking about this when I'm discussing their religion. But they have a strong belief that upon creation, God appointed and placed them in the forest as their home. So later, as we are going to see, now removing them from their God-given home was a bit unfair to them. As you see in the picture, they resided in temporary huts, which were made of leaves and sometimes lived in caves. What you see in the picture is a reconstruction of the kind of huts that they used to live. In the picture, I'm sitting with the king, the one you see in grayish and that a red top, and it's me in the hat, being a bit big. We almost filled up the hut, but that's the kind of hut that they lived in. And beside, you can see the fire. So at night, they always made sure that they had fire near the hut. And this was meant to send away the mosquitoes, the reptiles, and also some dangerous animals that could attack them. And as part of their cultural practice, they always wore kind of, should I call it a hat made of grass. And this was another way of protecting themselves from the enemies. The Basua community, the Basua, were headed by a leader traditionally known as Salia. That was the title given to their leader. Today, they have dropped this name in preference for king, for a term which is equivalent to king. And I think they are borrowing this from the neighboring communities where they are now living. So briefly, that's who the Basua of Bundibugyo are. But of course, there are other many attributes that we can attach to them, which I cannot discuss in this one single lecture. Briefly, let's see why they were happy while still living in the forest. When you interact with these people, they will tell you that while in the forest, they didn't have to work hard to earn a living. Food was readily available. Every morning they would wake up, pray to their god, Makerere, as I will be elaborating on that, ask him for blessings, and they would go and hunt. The ladies would go to collect fruits, others would go fishing, and they were assured of a proper meal, all the 3 meals that they needed. But what also made them feel happy while in the forest, they lived with their God. Like I mentioned before, they believe that God dwells in the forest. So they will tell you they saw, touched, and felt the God, because at times this God would manifest to them in the form of a tree and an animal or anything, and they would directly talk to their God. So they were happy that they had that sense of spiritual togetherness. There was no this element of believing in a God that you cannot see. Again, they lived together and respected each other in as much as they were divided along different clans. They lived together and respected each other. And they emphasize this because right now, where they are living after being evicted from the field, they feel that they are marginalized. People don't consider them to be human beings. They think they are half animals, half demos. So they feel that they lack that kind of respect that they once had. They also had access to medicine. As I earlier mentioned, they depended on the different plants and crops for medicine, and they don't believe in modern medicine. They believe that the only medicine that can cure them is the medicine that they used to have in the forest. They also tell us that they lived in unpolluted environment, and I believe this is true. The many times we have gone to the forest and spent a whole day and maybe half the night there, you would feel and enjoy the fresh air in the forest. Where there is a different story. More importantly, they tell us they sang and danced every day, and they danced for a purpose. They had different dances for different rituals, for different traditions and practices, but they also danced for leisure, something which is now very hard to maintain. So all that put together they really lived a very good life, which they miss now. What happened and what was the turning point? Now, in 1991, the government of Uganda declared Semulik Forest as a national park. And immediately after this declaration, they asked all the people who stayed in the forest to vacate immediately. And unfortunately, the Baswa also had to leave the forest. Unlike others who had penetrated the forest, maybe to get more land for cultivation and other things, they had another home which they could return to. But the Baswa had only the forest as their home, a home not only for their current population, but also for generations and generations. But they had to leave. So when they were told to leave, there were no prior preparations that maybe the kind of life you are going to live is different from the kind of life you've been living. It's clear from the documents that we revised and the interview we had with the national park rangers. They told us that the government gave them land to cultivate. But these are the people who had spent their entire life without cultivation. And then, poof, from nowhere, there is the land and the guise, as we call them in Ugandan English. Go ahead and start cultivating to earn a living. And what happened? They rejected the land. They refused to cultivate because that was never part of them. And what we see is that this brutal eviction, which excluded the indigenous people's values, traditions, and practices, left the Baswa dehumanized and marginalized. What were some of the immediate effects of the eviction? Quite a number of things happened to them, but which really happened and happens to be a sad reminder of the past is that more than a half of the Baswa who were living in Semulik forest died immediately after the eviction. Some of them felt betrayed. How could the government make them leave the land which was given to them by God? So many of them decided to hang themselves and died. He said, we'd rather die here than leaving our land. Others obeyed and left the forest, but on getting to where they had established a camp for them, they couldn't stand the weather outside the forest. It was too hot for them. Remember, the forest was always cool and provided a very good, conducive environment. And here we are mixed up with other people. There was a lot of noise pollution coming from disco, the cars passing. These are the things they had never kind of, experienced. And worse still, they were put in ramshackle kind of houses with old iron sheets. And the noise from the rain falling on the iron sheets was intolerable. All that put together, many of them actually died. And when we are interviewing one of the national park rangers, he was kind of, without even feeling the pain, said, actually, a number of them died when we removed them in the forest. But the weather was harsh, and this caused a number of deaths. Now, with no access to the forest and the fact that they couldn't cultivate the land that had been given to them, many of them turned into beggars. So they stood on the road coming from Fort Potro to Bundibugyo and begged from whoever cared to to stop and say hello. But of course, many of them stopped just to look at these short people whom they had never seen, and others they had maybe read or heard all sorts of stories, so they could. Can you imagine the government preferred animals to us? So they feel the animals, the monkeys, and whatever is in the forest is more important than us. Can you imagine me as a king who had, who was highly respected in the forest? Now I'm standing on the roadside begging. So they would say this with a lot of emotions, and really, you can see how desperate they are. So because of what they were going through, not having what to eat, not sleeping in conditions to them which felt were conducive, many of them resorted to excessive drinking and use of drugs. And this is still happening. Many of them are wasted because of excessive drinking. Others, I think, need to be taken to a rehabilitation because of the excessive use of drugs. But they resorted to this as a way of forgetting what had happened to them. In the next few slides, I'll be taking you through what they actually have lost as of now. In my interaction with King Geoffrey Inzito, I asked him, what did you lose as Baswa when you left the village, when you left the forest? The king responds and laments with tears in his eyes, saying, the day we were forced to leave the forest is the day we died. We lost power and control of our natural habitat. We left our history and memories behind. Our culture is gone. Our language is disappearing. Without the forest, our values, traditions, and practices cannot be held. I remember this was a very emotional statement, which made both of us, the researchers and the elders who are around, crying for some minutes. But later I put myself together and asked the king, what exactly did you lose? One of the things that they cherished as the Baswa was the marriage institution. The Baswa, unlike many African communities, practiced monogamy. It was an abomination for a man to have more than one wife. It was one man, one love for life. What is happening today? Because the majority of the Baswa people died, the few who remained are related to each other. So they can no longer marry from the same community. So they have now gone outside to marry, but because the surrounding communities allows to marry more than one, they have also resorted to it. So the young generation, you will find that they have either 2 or even 3, despite the fact that they don't have much in terms of money to take care of the family. Before they left the forest, it was okay for a woman to marry a Nani Muswa person, but it was a taboo for a man to marry a Nani Muswa woman. This was done to keep their lineage pure. Actually, the elders will outright tell you that many of our grandchildren are not pure. There is a lot of mixed blood in them. How are we going to ensure that our lineage survives this century? So they kind of don't believe that the children who are born of Nani Baswa men are true Baswa. Again, it was a taboo for one to have sex before marriage. Today, when you visit the community, you find that the majority of girls have children. They are single mothers simply because the men from the bigger surrounding communities come and use the girls, and after impregnating them, they go away. And they often do this because of the funny or stupid belief that when you sleep with a Muswa woman, you can be healed of HIV. So it is usually the men with HIV who come to sleep with the poor girls. They leave them with the children and again, having infected them with HIV. So women are now getting another thing that has changed in terms of their marriage institution. Before they left the village, the forest, marriage took place. If, for example, one family had a daughter and a son, and the other had the same, they would exchange the girls or the daughters. In case you didn't have a girl to exchange, you had to pay a bride price, which was in form of a hunting dog. So if you had a good hunting dog, you would take it to the parents and they would give you the girl. But now they asked us, why should we continue asking for a hunting dog as a bride price? We no longer hunt. It doesn't make any sense anymore. So what happens now? They try to ask for other, things like cows or goats, which actually they don't keep, but slaughter right away and eat, and then they give them the girls. Another thing that has changed is music and dance as a cultural practice. When you look at the Baswa music and dancing, they were inseparable. They sang and danced during several festivals. Every morning before they went hunting, they would sing and dance and then ask their god, Makerere, for blessings. But they also sang and danced during funerals, during circumcisions, and various other cultural practices. What we see in this particular cultural practice, it was a taboo for men to dance with women they are related to, because this was one, they had dances, or such dances were one way of identifying a potential wife or a husband. Today, as you will soon be seeing in the next slide, men, women, old and young dance together, because now they no longer dance because of, as part of the cultural practice, they dance for money. When the tourists come, they get their drums and other music instruments and start dancing. So if you don't participate in the performance, you will miss out on the money from the tourists. So you find that everyone, children, adults, whether related or not, they sing together. So they would tell you that although we sometimes singing and dancing for money portrays us as tourist objects, they will say we have lost our dignity as Baswa. Yes, true, they dance, but like I said, now they are dancing for money, and to them they feel like they are being treated as tourist objects. What you see is some of the Batwa or the Basua of Bundibugyo dancing for us last month. You can see the children are there, the elder are there, the youth are there. The wife to the king in the black top herself is dancing. In the past, you would sit somewhere and wait for the subjects to bring whatever they want. But even herself, as a wife to the king, has to participate in the dancing. Another thing that has totally vanished as part of their cultural heritage is their religion. These people were very religious community before the eviction from the forest. They believed in a god whom they referred to as Makerere. So it was Makerere they turned to whenever they were going to hunt to ask for blessings, but also whenever any of them fell ill or they felt they lacked anything, they could turn to Makerere. What is very interesting and what they feel they are missing a lot is that they believe that God does not dwell anywhere apart from the forest. So they lived together with their God, and they would tell you that we heard, felt, and even touched our God, because it would appear to them physically in terms of a tree, at times in form of a reptile, in form of an animal. They will tell you that a certain kind of tree will grow from nowhere within a day, and then they will get a sign to know that that's their God who has come to see them. Or an animal would come and camp there for days, and then after it will leave, and they will know it's their God. So they had that direct connection with their God. So after the eviction, they sought membership in religious charity groups as a survival strategy. So when, for example, Muslims come and they promise them clothing, food, and spiritual renewal, they follow that. As soon as he stops giving them what they were getting from them, then another one comes, maybe a Catholic, then they will turn to Catholics. They will become Catholics. If the Catholic group leaves and the Advents come, then they will associate themselves with those, not because they live in these religions, but it's because it's another way of surviving and maybe also getting or seeking a new identity. Another thing which they are almost losing is the language. The Baswa speak a language called Kuswa, which is reported as a dialect of Kwamba, and a Central Western Bantu language. This is what we read in the literature, but based on the ongoing description that we are making, we believe that Kuswa is different from Kwamba. So although the language is still used, the young generation is steadily shifting to other dominant languages like Lubwisi, Kwamba,
This stays here.
Lukhonzo, which are commonly used in public spaces such as the market, in the church, and schools. And again, due to intermarriages, which I've talked about earlier, and lack of intergenerational transmission of the language, sadly, Kuswa will become extinct. The kind of documentation which we are making may not help to preserve this language. I will be talking about that in one of the last slides. So today, as we speak, yes, a few elders, about 25 of them, can speak the language, but the youth and the children who were born after the eviction, they can hardly speak the language. Another cultural heritage which is almost dying is the art of craft making. For a long time, the Baswa have been making crafts in form of spears, arrows, gourds, as you see the one being held by Mama Rosie in the picture. They would make walking sticks, which they sold to the neighboring communities and tourists. Now, the challenge is that the young generation is not interested in this kind of industry. They have joined the other things that are being done by the youth in this particular community. But also they have a challenge that they no longer have free access to the forest. So they don't have adequate materials to continue making this craft. So there is fear that this long-standing traditional economic activity may disappear soon. Of now, yes, it's still going on, but in the near future, it might be no more. Lastly, as part of the cultural heritage that they have lost is the medicine. The Baswa had a well-developed system where they used the herbs to treat various ailments, but not everyone practiced this. It was God, Makerere, who appointed and anointed an individual to serve as a herbalist. As we speak now, many of those who were anointed by Makerere have died. Now they only have 2 individuals who can practice as herbalists. So what will happen is that when these 2 die, one of them is an elderly woman called Grace. it will mean that that industry will also die with these two surviving annuities from Makerere. So without free access to the forest, this industry is slowly dying, and also the fact that they don't have, no longer have access to their gold to anoint other people. Once these two die, then we shall say goodbye to this industry. Now, when you look at the Baswa, they had names, and they had specific naming strategies to get a name for their baby. Whenever a child was born, was taken to the bank of river Semulik, and they will lay down the child. So the elders, in the presence of children, will call out the names of their ancestors based on the clan the child belonged. So they will shout out names: Dingolo, Nzito, Auti, Bambereji, Yeneka, if Yeneka was one of them. Now, the spirits will then say, okay, that's the right name. That is the most suitable name you should give to the baby. What are we seeing today? Many of them, they have embraced Christian names, and actually many of them have dropped the names they came with from the forest. And now they are giving their babies names that belong to other tribes in which they are living right now. So as time goes on, we are going to lose the names. And of course, they have already lost the naming strategies because they no longer have the access to the forest to take the baby to the river. The traditional dressing is also becoming extinct. The Baswa traditional attire consisted of clothing made from animal skins and plant materials. When you look at the picture in this slide, you can see the king donning the back cloth, but this is when they had already left the forest. That's now you see them blending both of Western style and the traditionals. Now, with the influence of the neighboring communities and, of course, modernization, now they typically wear Western style clothing with traditional attires reserved for cultural events and performances. There are quite a number of things that they have already lost, which I don't discuss here. For example, the circumcision ceremony, the child initiation ceremony, how they used to conduct their weddings, all that have been lost simply because many of these things cannot be done without the forest. There would be a particular tree, for example, where they performed the circumcision, and they would do it elaboratively. They had a certain place where they had performance for child initiation. All such cultural practices are no longer possible. It is sad that when we talk about their culture, now we talk about it in past tense. We used to do this while in the forest, meaning that they no longer are able to do that. From what I've said, or based on what I've been discussing, of course, there is an urgent need to preserve the little which is still remaining, especially the language and the bits of culture which they can reconstruct. I'm happy that there are certain organizations, especially the Cross Cultural Foundation Uganda. It made an initial attempt to document, for example, the folk tales, and they have published this. They also made a film on hunting, which gives us a glimpse of what used to happen when they were still hunting. But that's not enough. It is good, but that's not enough. Recently, there is a group of researchers funded by ELDP who are documenting and describing the linguistic repertoires, culture, and oral tradition of the Basua of Bundibugyo. And the picture is the team which is doing that. So they are trying to document the language, and by the end of the 3 years, at least we shall have a rough, a preliminary description of the Kuswa language, and we would have also documented the culture, but a culture from the narratives and the memories that they still have, because most of the culture is no longer practiced. And we also plan to document the oral tradition of such of the Basua of Bundibugyo. So that is the team in the picture, with Professor Lena Vislock, Saudah Namyalo wearing a jacket, and others, the PhD students, the post and some postdoc students. In conclusion, this is what we can say, that the drastic change to their lifestyle, along with their small number, as well as the despised and marginalized status, the Baswa's cultural heritage, most of it is lost, and the little which is remaining is steadily becoming extinct. And based on the narratives and what they tell us, no meaningful efforts can be made to preserve their culture without the forest. This is an appeal to all of us, and specifically the government of Uganda, that the Baswa live a desperate life. There's an urgent need for rehabilitation. Even after 20 years of eviction, they have never forgotten the forest. Matongo. Matongo is a word in Kuswa, which means the forest. Thank you for listening to me. And in the picture, the person circled is King Geoffrey Nzito with some of his subjects. I'm happy to associate with them. I'm one of his subjects. I'm the one wearing this green and with a scarf on the head. So in the rest are some of the elders in the community. The one in black is one of the only surviving herbalists who received the anointing from God, Makerere. So when Mama Grace goes and another one who is not in the picture, then we would have forgotten that beautiful industry. Thank you very much, and back to you, Yeneka.
Thank you so much, Saudah, for that fascinating lecture. I am clapping virtually for you for your talk, even though the story you've told us is a very sad one, in fact, but at the same time a very interesting one. So we have some time for questions. If you want to ask a question, can you raise your virtual hand? And there have also been some questions already submitted in the form, the subscription form. So perhaps while we're waiting for people to raise their hand, Saudah, can you take one or two of those questions that you already have?
Okay. The first question was, what is the current status of the Basua language? I think this has already been answered. It is highly endangered, spoken by just a handful of 20 to 25 elders or elderly people. The youth can try to speak the language, but they speak it with a lot of code switching and mixing with other languages that they are trying to learn. So actually in our documentation efforts, we are trying to classify the languages into three. We have the Kuswa, which is spoken by the elderly population, and then Kuswa Amba, which seemed to be in between Kuswa and Ama spoken by the youth, and then another mixed kind of breed where you just have a few words from Kuswa and many others from either Lubwisi, Kwamba, or Lukhonzo. So the status of the language is it is highly endangered. And I would call upon linguists who are interested in documenting endangered languages to take interest in this language. The second question was, how do Baswa encode and transmit collective memory linguistically? Hope I understand the question. It is through folk tales. They are like many other African communities. They were a very oral community, so they transmitted their culture by the word of mouth. So they have quite a number of folk tales loaded with all these memories and culture. They also have poems, they have songs, they have proverbs, and many others. Another question was, how do you ensure? Yes, please.
There's a question by Sophie. Sophie, if you can unmute yourself and pose your question.
Hello, thank you very much for the presentation. We are sharing the computer. My name is Susan Chiguli. I thank you, Professor, for the presentation. I wanted to ask, you talked in the conclusion, you mentioned the Baswa in urgent need of rehabilitation. When you talk about rehabilitation, because you are on the ground, what do you exactly mean by rehabilitation? What kind of interventions? Because we may sit here and give ideas, but we have not been on the ground. What kind of interventions can be made to be able to either integrate the Baswa into the communities outside the forest, or to see that they go back to the forest, which I doubt can be done. But well, I would like to hear from you on that point. Plus one thing about the literature of the Baswa. So since you're saying that most of the things have been lost, are those dances and the songs that are done for tourists, are they really in connection with what happened in the forest? Do they still give us a kind of inkling of what their life was like in the forest? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Chiguli, for the two questions. Now, in terms of rehabilitation, as I mentioned in my presentation, many of the Baswa people are addicted to drinking and use of drugs as a survival strategy, which is wasting many of them. They wake up in the morning, as long as they have some small cash on them, they will start drinking, they will buy the drugs, the marijuana and all that. Now, you find people who would have carried on the legacy of the Baswa, they are being wasted in drinking and use of drugs. So my thinking was that if the government can intervene and rehabilitate them so that they stop the excessive drinking and use of drug, maybe for the next 20 or 30, we can still have the Baswa people around. But also, they are still tormented with the way they were evicted from the forest, a place or a natural habitat which they believe it was given to them by God. No matter how many good houses you build for them, they cannot appreciate them without the forest. So there's a need for mental kind of rehabilitation to make them understand that maybe it's not possible for you to go back to the village, to the forest, but you can survive in this other way. As I mentioned, they were given land, and many other non-government organizations have come in to help so that they can join farming, which is the source of income for all the people who are living in this region. But they were never farmers. They were never cultivators. So there is a need to slowly incorporate them into the community so that they can also have a meaningful life. Now, in terms of songs, like I said, songs and dances, yes, they had different dances for particular activities. For example, when the tourists come, they cannot sing the songs they used to sing during the funerals. At one time, I remember we requested them, and again, for a purpose of preserving such kind of music, to sing for us the kind of music they used to sing during each and every tradition. And when it came to the music they used to sing during the funerals, all of them started crying, and maybe we felt that that's not a good idea to ask them to reconstruct that. So the songs they usually sing to the tourists are those which they used to sing during the evening, during their leisure time. Those the kind of dances and songs they used to sing during weddings are the ones they sing. But those which were kind of ritual specific, like during circumcision, during burial, during prayer, those ones, they don't sing them, because like those they used to sing during praise to Makerere, now Makerere is not there, so it will be a taboo for them to sing such kind of religious music when their God is not present. I don't know whether I have fully answered your questions, but just in case I've not, we can meet in the corridors and I can tell you more of the same.
Wonderful. We have Edith, then Amani, then Pamela. Edith Natugunda.
Hello. Prof. Saudah, thank you very much for that very, very rich presentation. Once you got to listening, you didn't want to miss even one word because it was so interesting. Now, my interest is in the interaction that the Baswa have had with the communities around, and whether they have any social or cultural benefit that they have got from those interactions, whether when they said that they have been displaced, do they encourage them to go to school? Do they use their language also in teaching, or at least the oral traditions when stories are being told? Is there anything, because in comparison to other studies that have been talking about displacements, there are some times when cultures get in contact and something comes off, like in the mixing of the people. Maybe they start to participate in leadership slowly, or they start to get into education, or their language starts to get into being used for instruction. Is there any positive, any benefit that has come out of the cultural contacts? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Natukunda. In terms of culture, I would say no. Unfortunately, they are being swallowed by the bigger communities. Like I said, they are surviving under the shadow of the bigger communities like the Lubwisi, who are very aggressive, and actually they are a threat not only to the Baswa, but also the indigenous communities like the Kwamba and the Lukhonzo who live in the mountains. They are all being threatened with the aggressive nature of the Lubwisi. So the Baswa being small in number, like I mentioned now, about less than 100, including the children, the language itself has not penetrated the community. And actually they live in a camp. Like they are kind of isolated from the others. They live with their neighbors, but they live in a capsule, they stay together, and very few people have bothered to learn the language. However, what I might consider as a good development, there are a number of children who have gone to school, who are going to school, maybe about 10, who are educated by different non-government organizations. But the sad story is that they have been removed from their community. By the time they finish education and come back, I don't think they will have even respect for their elders because they are growing up without them. They don't know the language. Now they are living a different kind of life. Some of them are living outside Uganda. They've been taken by some Europeans. So when such people come back to Bundibugyo, they may hardly mix with the community. But there's that positive development that some of them are now going to school. The language is not used in schools, nor is it used in churches. It's only used amongst themselves, and quite often they end up, speaking other languages. During the documentation fieldwork, would always prompt them that please akuswa, meaning speaking kuswa, akuswa. So even the elders, if you don't prompt them, you will find them speak, Lubwisi or Kwamba or Rutoro and other languages. I hope I've answered your question, Professor Natukunda.
Very clearly, Professor Saudah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Amani Lusekelo.
Yes. Thank you, Chairperson. Saudah, thank you for the talk. You added another history to the histories I know about the foraging communities. When I was in Botswana in the 2010-2012, I had the same experience that the Khoi and the San who are in Botswana, who were asked to go out of the Kalahari game reserve, or they were assigned very good villages. They were put into very government-helped settlements outside the foraging areas, and they became alcoholic. Similar to the story you are talking about. In Tanzania, the Hadza, who are very popular in the YouTube and the other formats, the Hadza were taken out of the forest and asked to settle into villages. And in all the 4 villages they have been, most of them, they have become alcoholics. I understand it's the same for the Akie, who are in Kenya and Tanzania. They were also asked to go out of the forest where they were foraging. And many of them, they become alcoholic. And they are small communities, and they share most of the things they have. So if one person have resource, they will buy alcohol and everybody will become drunk. Now, this alternative you are proposing, Saudah, is dangerous. I was wondering if we want to, if we wish to ask the Maasai to get rid of cattle, and we assign them farms and ask them to farm, they will become alcoholics, I presume. Because now you evicted them in their normal life, in their day-to-day means of living. I assume they'll become alcoholic. If we take the Baganda, for instance, who are a banana culture like mine, the Nyakyusa, and we cut bananas off and ask them to live off millet or maize, I assure you, like the Bahai, they'll become alcoholics. Because you uproot people from their normal livelihood and you put them into a different environment. There is, I presume there will be very hard mechanisms to rejuvenate them so that they drop their common means of living and acquire a new one. To me, the best option would be take them back to the forest. And these smaller communities are very good in preserving the forest. And let us agree that the world is diverse. Some people will be farmers. Some people will be businessmen. Some people will be hunter-gatherers. Some people will be any other activity they are engaged in, which if you uproot them from that activity, eventually they'll become disrupted. And I assume we need to take a model which will allow the people to kind of continue with their regular life rather than putting them into a different environment and assigning them a different economic activity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor, for actually your giving suggestions and alternatives. Indeed, there is a group of Europeans headed by one guy who nicknamed himself the Big Pygmy. He has done a lot of work in among the Basua. They set up a school where these people can go and learn, crafts making from a different angle, hairdressing. But the school is occupied by the neighboring tribes, and the Baswa are not interested. My thinking is that maybe, like you were saying, they could be allowed to go back to the village, to the forest. But based on the interview we had with the National Park Game Rangers, I think the government is not ready to look into that direction. So if the government is not ready to take them back to the forest, then again, we need to do what I'm suggesting, rehabilitation, sensitizing them. Maybe over the years, they would accept their fate and fully integrate into the community. Thank you, Prof.
So Saudah, are we saying the society we are integrating them into is a superior society, and their forest kind of life is an inferior kind of life? If we approach matter, if the government of Uganda is approaching this subject matter in that way, it is as taking a very bad decision. I'm talking on behalf of the Hadza and the Akia in Tanzania, in which we said, no, hunting and gathering is primitive. So please sit down in sedentary villages and become farmers, which is not an easy task for the people. Assuming the foraging life is inferior is really bad.
No, that I'm not saying that they're inferior in any way. I would feel very offended if anyone came up and said, the Baganda, we are inferior. I mean, I'm proud of my tribe, my ethnic group. So I feel for Baswa, but this is a question of what the government decided. And remember, they did this in the name of conservation. So they feel that maybe the Baswa cannot coexist with the animals. I don't know what informed their decision. But maybe later, as we go into this research, we will engage more. so that we can understand why they cannot be allowed to go back. And if we are to advocate for them to go back, under which conditions, because I'm sure they will not be allowed to hunt. They say you are endangering the animals. Yeah. Yes, Eneka, any other questions, please?
Let's have another question from Pamela. I think we'll continue until 1:15, or did you want to go beyond that, Saudah?
No, you are the one sharing. We go with what you decide.
Then I think we'll go until 1:15, and I will leave the room open so that the discussion can continue if people feel like that. Pamela, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Professor Saudah, for that very fascinating presentation. I must congratulate you. I can only imagine the amount of time and work you've put in. I had a small question. So you said in their new location, the Basua or Batwa, can no longer practice circumcision, which was very central to their culture. And I'm just wondering, is it that circumcision is no more, they aren't adopting at all, like finding other ways of having the circumcision, even if they do not have access to those particular trees or sections within the forest where they used to carry out rituals? And then I had a second question also about language. And so you say they are confined in a camp. So my sense, I would imagine if they are confined in a camp and then there's nothing interfering with their language, they're able to speak their language. But then there are these other sections of the young people who go to school, maybe to boarding schools in Uganda as well. You talked more about those who go abroad. And then my question here is that, so this, if there are children that are taken to boarding schools in Uganda, do they go back, do they go to the camp during holidays to mix with their families, or they don't? And I'm asking this because, one, I think that it seems to me that loss of language is not a unique thing to the Batwa. So I want to be able to appreciate that more, because I'm imagining a situation where, there are many children who go to boarding schools but still go back home and they are able to interact with their families and speak the language, unless they've really been completely detached from them and they don't get to mingle with their parents again. So I'll appreciate you casting a little bit of more light on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kanakwa, for the question. Let me start with the children who have gotten the opportunity to go to school. Many of them, like I said, are sponsored by different organizations, like the Advents. They have a strong presence at Intandi. Others are being looked after by different Europeans at individual basis. Now, what happens when they are taken to the school? Many of them live with these sponsors. At times, they are allowed briefly to come and visit their parents, but there is a fear. There is a fear that once they allow them back, for example, to spend the entire holiday with their family, they are going to be, abused. Like I said, there are many, many young girls who have been sexually abused, and now they are single mothers, and the men are not caring for them. So there is that fear that once they allow them to come back, they might be abused. So they hardly come back to mix with their families. The families, at times, I understand they are allowed to go and visit their children at school. all where in the families where they are staying. So because of that, language transmission is quite very minimal. You also mentioned that I mentioned that they are in a camp. Yes, they're in a camp, but they leave the camp to go and drink. They don't drink from there. They go in the nearby bars and they drink from there. They go to the market to buy whatever they want to buy. They also go out in the night, especially they use to the disco to dance and like try to live some kind of a normal life like the rest. So through that kind of interaction, they have now come to learn the languages spoken in the area, so that when they go to the market, they can communicate. When they choose to go to the church or mosque, they can communicate, and other public spheres. So because of that interactions, again, they hardly now use the language. But I also remember we talked about intermarriages. Many of the women who are married, it is the men who come to the camp. For the women are not usually they are discouraged to go and join, say, the man's family, and this is because the way they look at them. They are passing and you hear all these whispers. Hey, the Batwa passing. You see that they throw all sorts of insults. So because of that, they've tried to keep together, but still they have to move away from the community just to get access to services. And then in terms of circumcision, circumcision is still done, but not in the same way it used to be done. When you listen to them, they used to do the circumcision more in a similar way like the bagiso. The girls would dance, go around the forest, do this and that. Now, because, like I say, they no longer have access to the trees where they used to perform the circumcision, and also the fact that they don't have access to some of the drugs and the tools, if I may call that, where they used to circumcise. Now they take their children to hospital for circumcision. When seeing it from the other angle, it is safer for them to be circumcised in hospitals, but that was never part of them. So they preferred that at least a boy would grow at a certain age, maybe around 15, and then they would do the circumcision ceremony and they would have them circumcised. It was another way of initiating the boys into manhood. So yes, they circumcise actually all the children, because many of them, they don't dress up. You can see that they are circumcised, but they are no longer doing it the way they used to do it. I hope I've been able to answer you, Professor Kanako.
Yes, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
And thank you all very much for attending this lecture. As said, the room will still be open. There are still questions in the chat, but also in person. So you're welcome to stay along. But I would like to close this sort of official part of it by thanking Saudah Namyalo again for all the hard work that you've done and for bringing us this tragic, sad, but very important information as well. Thank you so much for all your work and for your fascinating lecture. Let's give Saudah a round of applause again. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.